Good evening and welcome to the September 12th, 2022 regularly scheduled Valley View School Board meeting. Instead of our normal Pledge of Allegiance, we are going to have a special video shot at Irene King School in honor of the 9/11 situation from 2001, so 21 years ago. Ms. Zach, the Executive Secretary over there, shot this video. So if I would ask you to rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance and turn your phone off and watch the video.
Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. God bless America, and I'd like Chief Kroll just to say a few words.
This is a great event. We're very, very thankful and grateful to be invited to come and celebrate this with you and also remember what took place in September of 2001. Your patrol thanked us for our service. I want to thank each and every one of you for the honor to do it. It's an honor to do what we do. It's an absolute honor to be a police officer, to be a firefighter, to be a paramedic. It's our honor to do this. And the reason it's so important and the reason that it's such an honor for us to do this is because our way of life, the way we live in the United States, is worth it. It's absolutely worth it. You guys have a great weekend coming up. Thank you so much for the invite. Go Irene King Bears.
Thank you. And thank all the students and faculty at Irene King for making that happen. That was wonderful. Just since we're on that topic, there's a generation of kids who don't remember 9/11. You know, I mean, 21 years ago. Think about that. So it's incumbent upon us as adults to always let them remember those things. Thank you again for everybody who's involved in putting that together. Ms. Perro, would you please do the board affirmation statement?
Our mission is to empower every learner to be college, career, and life ready, and to develop, grow, and achieve as a productive citizen.
Moving down the agenda, Ms. Kinder, the agenda, please.
Yes, President Quigley, we'd like to ask the board to approve the agenda as presented.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. Student and staff recognition. The Illinois Theater Fest All-State Performers. Oh, I'm not sure what school it's from first. Principal Kinder, Romeoville High School.
Good evening, President Quigley, members of the board, Superintendent Kinder, members of senior leadership, members of the audience, members of the community. My name is Derek Kinder, very proud principal of Romeoville High School. It is my privilege to announce our spring musical directors, one being our newly named math department chair, Mrs. Jessica DeVos, and our newly named world language department chair, Rachel Calloway.
Good evening, Superintendent Kinder, school board members, and our VVSD families and friends. I could not be more excited and proud to be here today to celebrate these amazing students who have earned the honor of being selected to be in this year's Illinois High School Theater Festival's All-State production of Shrek the Musical. This is a tremendous honor and opportunity, and we want to share our pride. In particular, as far as we know, the first Romeoville High School student to ever be a part of the All-State production, Kamani Campbell.
Following a rigorous audition process, Kamani was selected to be a member of the cast. When he shared the happy news with us, we could not have been more thrilled for him. Kamani is the type of student you always root for. He came in as a freshman and blew us all away at his very first musical audition. He was the only freshman cast as a lead in Beauty and the Beast, where he dazzled audiences as Lumiere. He's also been featured in A Haunting We Will Go, Ashland Falls, and Legally Blonde Jr. His last main stage performance as Vlad and Anastasia was as delightful as he always is. A common audience response we get about Kamani is even when he's not the center of the scene, your eyes just naturally go to him. Not only is Kamani incredibly talented, but he's just genuinely a joy to be around. He brings light and energy to every room that he walks into. He's ambitious, game to try anything, and present every moment. He's an incredible member of the RHS community, both inside our theater and out. We will miss him very much when he graduates this year, but we are so ready to see him shine in his senior year and know he will be successful in whatever he chooses for his future.
Oh, okay.
Got it. Okay.
Dr. Pascavage.
Good evening, Dr. Pascavage, proud principal of Bolingbrook High School. Good evening, students, families, colleagues, Superintendent Kinder, our Board of Education, President Quigley, and everyone else in attendance. Over the years, Bolingbrook High School's had a number of all-state athletes, all-state students, all-state recognition, and this year we have 6 students in all-state theater. And I want you to think about that. It's the equivalent of having 3 first-team all-staters in football, 1 first-team all-stater in basketball. It's just something that doesn't happen. And today we're lucky enough to have Mr. Morrison, our director, who is also an all-stater here.
How'd you find that out?
And then, might have a connection or two. And then the thing for me is we go down every year to Theater Fest. We go with the kids, we spend the day with them, days with them, and they have us go to some of the sessions that they go to. It's one of my favorite times of the year. Every year they sign me up for Tippity Tap, literally. And I know by looking at me, you cannot believe that I'm not good at tap dancing, but I am not. But it really makes me realize how talented the kids are that are behind me. I could never be as good as they are at what they do, and that makes me and our school extremely proud. David Morrison to introduce our students. Thank you. Nice job.
Good evening, Superintendent Kinder, our esteemed school board members, families, and guests that are here with us tonight. Daily, I am in awe of what our students are capable of. In the classroom, on the field, on the stage, or off the stage, we teach our students to find their passions and to chase their dreams. I am here to talk in particular about 6 of our theater students at Bolingbrook High School. Now, I've stood before you talking about 1, 2, or even 3 at a time. This time, 6. I hope you have time. It is now the 6th year in a row that our students have been selected to the Illinois High School Theater Festival All-State Production, which this year is performed at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in January of 2023. The festival's theme, which is crafted by the executive director Ryan Lambert, is Are You Living or Just Existing? This year's All-State production of Shrek the Musical is a testament to that core question. The 48th Illinois High School Theater Festival remains still one of the oldest and largest non-competitive high school theater festivals in the country, which welcomes almost 4,500 theater students from across high schools everywhere in our state. If you ever have the opportunity to come support our students, I think you'll be amazed at the size and scope of this event, as I know Dr. Pascavage has seen firsthand several times. After auditioning and interviewing alongside countless other theater students from across the state, we are so proud to share that the following students have been selected to the company of this production. Senior Roya Zaucha, this is her 2nd All-State production in the cast. Junior Sydney Thomas, her 1st. Senior Isabella Wilson, her 2nd in the crew. Senior Gabriel Koppel in the pit. Senior Blake Whatcott, also in the pit. And Senior Matt DeRong, also in the pit. Roya Zaucha. Hi. Began making a mark on our stage in the spring musical A Drowsy Chaperone. She has played a major part on or off stage in nearly every production, both large and small, in our program. I can fondly recall her incredibly animated princess performance during the Broadway musical extravaganza during the spring of 2021. She currently is one of our Theater Honor Society historians this year. She is energetic, creative, and incredibly passionate about theater at BHS and in Valley View. Thank you, Roya. Sydney Thomas, hold on. Do it all at once. We're going to do it all at once. Sydney Thomas made her theatrical presence known during the fall 2020 production of A Delightful Quarantine. She's been a powerhouse both on and off the stage, always dependable, responsible, and caring. She is a co-captain of our A-Wing It improv team, and this fall you will see her fly through the sky as Wendy Moira Angela Darling in our November production of Peter Wendy. Thank you, CT. There's simply not enough that I can say about Isabella Wilson that would encompass both her accomplishments and her potential. Izzy got bit by the theater bug early and has been one of our most dependable crew members in the program. She cares so much about theater, especially about welcoming new students into it. She is the student technical director this year for our fall production of Peter Wendy, as she actively looks towards colleges that will help send her on her path towards being a theater professional. Gabriel Koppel started out as a student in the remote learning edition of Theater Arts 1, which, believe me, teaching theater arts on Zoom, it's fun. It was tough. And quickly became a household name within our space. He's been in both plays and musicals, as well as our A-Wing at improv team. He is bold and energetic on the stage and has no trouble taking risks, even if it means doing flips on the stage during last year's production of Mamma Mia. Gabe can be seen this fall as Mr. Darling in our upcoming production of Peter Wendy. Blake Whatcott is a newer presence on our stage, and we're wondering what the heck took him so long. Although he's gotten his start in our pit orchestra during Drowsy Chaperone, he's found a second home on our stage. He's comfortable and natural, yet intensely expressive. He's also a member of our A-Wing at improv team and can be seen in Peter Wendy as one of the featured Lost Boys. Matt Durong plays clarinet in Wind Symphony this year and has also performed on bass clarinet in past years. This year he is serving as section leader in the Marching Raiders. In addition to his performance experience, Matt also composes music. He has also performed in the pit orchestra for Drowsy Chaperone and Mamma Mia. He is a promising young musician, and we are so proud of his accomplishments. The accomplishments that we share with you today are only made possible by the immense outpouring of support by our building administrators and staff, so thank you to Dr. Pascavage and your incredible administration, as well as your continued support of theater both in our schools and our community. For that, we thank you sincerely from the bottom of our hearts. So please join me in congratulating Roy Azaucha, Sydney Thomas, Isabella Wilson, Gabriel Koppel, Blake Whatcott, and Matt Durong for their selection to the 2023 Illinois High School Theater Festival All-State production of Shrek the Musical. Okay, or just go. Just keep going. I'll give them to you.
Sounds negative, they're in the pit, but it's more than that. Both of our schools, the high schools, put on wonderful performances. I had the opportunity to take my parents to one of the theater shows a couple, 3 years ago, and my folks lived downstate, and my mom said, why would I go pay lots of money that I go to pay in St. Louis when I can see theater performances just like this at a high school? So take that back to your schools and say, hey, there's adults who, my folks I haven't been in school in a long time, but when they go and they see something at that quality and that caliber and they say, this is amazing, they wish that they had had something like that when we were kids. So congratulations to all you on that. Moving down the agenda, Spotlight Video, Miss Rachel Delamorte.
Yes, in tonight's Spotlight video, we're proud to introduce you to Humphrey Middle School's coaching coordinator, Mrs. Rachel Delamorte, who's also a proud Valley View School District alum. She is a coaching coordinator who collaborates with educators on their journey in continuous improvement, which begins with creating a responsive and caring culture for students in their classrooms. So let's spend a few minutes with Mrs. Delamorte this evening.
One thing that is, it seems little, but it's pretty impactful, is just remembering to greet students and using their names. And then also helping students use each other's names. So the relationship between teacher and student, I'm gonna greet you by name so I know you're here today. And it's important that you're here and you're significant in this space.
What are some effective ways for teachers to build connection and community within their classroom?
So there are a lot of practices that can be incorporated along with content-specific practices. And one thing is like interactive learning structures. And when you're doing interactive learning structures, kids again are having to work together, and that gives you opportunities to work on skills that kids need to be able to work together and cooperate and have tolerance and learn how to have good discourse. So putting an interactive learning structure in with your math content or social studies content, it still gives you a place to build those skills that build community. Because to have a strong community, we need to be able to have empathy for each other. We need to be able to have good discussions and learn more about each other. At the beginning of a lesson, if you're doing an activity where kids are sharing something about themselves, and then other kids can say, yes, just like me. There's a just like me activity that we've done with some of our responsive classroom training and activities. So something like that, when kids can hear, this is my answer to the question, and 4 other students in the class have a similar answer or feel a similar way, or I have a connection to someone that I didn't really think, that person isn't like me, they're not my friend, I don't really know them, but those opportunities help me to see we are more alike than I think.
What is the most important thing that a teacher can do in their classroom to make sure the year starts off right?
I think it is to communicate joy right now in this moment and hopefulness for what the possibilities are to come. So students can see, again, like it comes back to belonging as well. I belong here. I belong in this community of people because of relationships, but I also belong here academically. Sometimes we think belonging is just about those personal connections, but it also, especially in our schools, is about belonging academically. Something that we did this year is we had teachers think of 3 words that they would want students to use when describing their classroom or their experiences. So if you're not a classroom teacher, you still are connecting with kids. So what are the 3 words you would want kids to use to describe those experiences with you? So teachers thought about it, came up with those words. We put them on, we laminated them, and people put those words outside their door. Again, with the intention of, let's try to live up to these words. This is what we said we want and who we want to be for our students. So just that reminder of, those 3 words that we kind of established at the beginning of the school year.
Thank you, Mrs. Delamorte, for giving us a glimpse into the really important work that's done to grow our classroom spaces and create responsive and caring communities. Thank you very much.
Anybody who knows Rachel, she doesn't mess around. She's out there, and she is just a joy to be around personally and cares about this community and the school district very, very much. Moving down the agenda, Treasurer's Report. Mr. Renich.
Treasurer's Action Report 6.1 includes the normal schedule of financial reports, balance sheets, summary of revenue and expenditures, interim obligations and debt service payments totaling $6,954,740.08 for your approval.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, hearing none. Roll call vote, please.
Member Badouris?
Yes.
Secretary Pro Tem Campbell? Yes. Member Venegas?
Yes.
Member Perro?
Yes.
Vice President Zach?
Yes.
And President Quigley?
Yes. Mr. Renich.
6.2, the schedule of bills for the month of September. We have 6 funds totaling bills $3,538,982.55 for your approval.
So moved. Motion?
Second.
Motion and seconded. Is there any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Member Perro?
Yes.
Member Venegas?
Yes.
Secretary Pro Tem Campbell?
Yes.
Member Badouris?
Yes.
Vice President Zach?
Yes.
And President Quigley?
Yes. Mr. Renich.
In your packet, you have a summary of investments for the month of August, along with the property taxes received, state funding update, and all schools trust account. This is an informational agenda item.
Does anyone have any questions on those 4 items? I see that the state funding is down to 300 and some thousand, 392,000. That's a nice number. A lot better than 5 or 10 million. Moving down the agenda, consent agenda items.
Yes, we have 5 items that we are seeking approval for under consent. 7.1, board meeting minutes, August 22nd, 2022. 7.2, executive session meeting minutes, August 22nd, 2022. 7.3, special board meeting minutes, August 30th, 2022. 7.4, gifts to BJ Ward Elementary School, Bolingbrook High School, and Romeoville High School. 7.5, trip approval for Bolingbrook High School Music Department. And 7.6, student activity contract for Irene King Elementary.
So moved. Second.
Motion and seconded. Is there any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Member Venegas?
Yes.
Member Perro?
Yes.
Member Badouris?
Yes.
Secretary Pro Tem Campbell?
Yes.
Vice President Zach?
Yes.
President Quigley.
Yes. Board liaison reports. Any and all from my left? Any and all from my right? Since we're in that part of the world, the Illinois General Assembly has established that I think it's the 4th through possibly the 10th of January could be a potential lame duck session. They do have the veto session scheduled. So in a lame duck session, it's anybody who didn't get reelected but is still in the General Assembly before the new General Assembly is sworn in, which will occur the second week of January. And sometimes legislation that you may like or don't like, things that you thought were long gone, get reinvigorated in those periods of time. So there's always a cautionary tale to be done during lame duck session. Also, if you zoom in on me, just since I'm sitting here, I'm wearing a United Way shirt. And I had the opportunity to play in the United Way's county golf outing, Will County golf outing for United Way a couple weeks ago. About 1.5 out of 3, or no, it's not quite half, about 40% of the families in Will County at some point in time utilize services from the United Way. We are a very large school district. We have lots of people. We represent, thousands and tens of thousands of families in this district. The United Way has all kinds of opportunities for you to self-guide where you would like to make your contributions go. You would be amazed at the number of programs that we touch that are part of the United Way. In that vein, I'm going to invite the new executive director, Cami Martinez, to come to a meeting. If every employee in our district just gave $5 a paycheck, you'd be amazed about the amount of services that they could provide and the things that they can do for the families and the children in need and not in need. My sons went to a program for summer camp. I had no idea it was United Way funded, but it was. So and that was years ago, but there's things that can be done with that extra money. So I would implore finding building leaders in every building that want to get involved. We can make this thing fun, but please start talking to people about this, and maybe we can do something to help United Way, because they do give back. And I know that there's some people on this board who are engaged in community activities that are supported and sponsored by the United Way. So start thinking about that, if you would, please. I think it's a kind of a big deal. So, and I used to sit on their local government committees, and I know that, sure, they have overhead like every other organization, but the money goes back on the streets, and you can put like I said, you can self-direct wherever you want. They have a whole Christmas tree list of organizations that you can direct your money to. Let's see, consolidated action reports. Oh, I'm sorry, audience participation. Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to address the board this evening? Seeing none, hearing none, moving down the agenda. Ms. Nash, if you would, please.
Okay, action report 10.1 is our consolidated action report. For personnel, we are seeking your approval on all items as presented.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Is there any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Member Badouris?
Yes.
Secretary Pro Tem Campbell?
Yes.
Member Venegas?
Yes.
Member Perro?
Yes.
Vice President Zach?
Abstain.
President Quigley.
Yes. Ms. Nash.
Action report 10.2 is resolution number 2309, approving the multi-year employment contract for Dr. Jason Pascavage as the principal of Bolingbrook High School.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Is there any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Secretary Pro Tem Campbell?
Yes.
Member Venegas?
Yes.
Member Perro?
Yes.
Member Badouris?
Yes.
Vice President Zach?
Yes.
President Quigley.
Yes. 10.3.
Action report 10.3 is resolution number 2310, approving the multi-year employment contract for Derek Kinder as the principal of Romeoville High School.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. Once again, is there any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Member Venegas?
Yes.
Member Perro?
Yes.
Member Badouris?
Yes.
Secretary Pro Tem Campbell?
Yes.
Vice President Zach?
Yes.
President Quigley?
Yes. Mr. Renich, resolution on TRS supplemental savings.
In 2018, the General Assembly passed a public law amending the pension code to include an optional defined contribution benefit for TRS members. This program is commonly referred to as a supplemental savings plan, or SSP. The district is required to have this resolution on file with TRS by September 30th. This was presented as an informational item at the previous board meeting. The administration is recommending that the Board of Education approve the TRS Supplemental Savings Plan Employer Participation Agreement and resolution as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and seconded. Is there any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Member Perro?
Yes.
Member Badouris?
Yes.
Secretary Pro Tem Campbell?
Yes.
Member Venegas?
Yes.
Vice President Zach?
Yes.
And President Quigley?
Yes. Moving down the agenda. Ms. Kinder, action reports?
No report this evening.
Doesn't appear you have anything. Wow. Information reports from the superintendent. Now we're getting somewhere.
Now we do have a few. I just have a few general updates in 11.1 superintendent update, as well as a few updates in relation to family empowerment and engagement and responsive and caring culture. After that, we do have specific updates on equity and continuous improvement and learning and growth. So we'll move into that. In the center of the photo of some of our wonderful children engaged in learning is one of our newest members of our community. That's Blair, the facility dog at Oakview Elementary School. Very popular member of our community, as you can see. And so we're continuing the great work that all of the adults in our community do for kids every day. And I'm just so proud to share that and also continue to build that partnership with families. And we are working very much on empowering families and in authentic engagement that supports student learning. And so we will have updates related to this. We're updating the information that's available on our website specific to learning opportunities, empowerment, ways to become more engaged, ways that we can better listen, ways that we can better collaborate together, as well as collecting voice and improving those connection efforts. So we invite families to check out our website, and that will be an evolving work that we will continue to craft and respond. We do have some district-wide learning opportunities that are coming up very soon. Now, these are in addition to the building and family engagement efforts. We have partnered with the Glenbard Webinar Parent Series to offer some online learning opportunities that Valley View families are able to engage in as well. So we have some of those coming up. Specifically, you can see on the scene one that's specific to suicide, one that is specific to raising resilient kids in the digital age. And then we have 2 on-site, in-person opportunities that we'd like to highlight coming up in September. One is Practical Mindful Emotional Regulation Strategies to Help Children with Dr. Vicki Trotter. That will take place at Brooks Middle School, but that is open to all Valley View families, and we encourage families to come out and join us on that evening. We also will be having a session at, is that at Brooks Middle School? It says Brooks, I believe that's at AVM. We'll have to confirm that, but that is a Spanish language session. What is adolescence? ¿Qué es de la adolescencia? And that will be on Wednesday, September 28th with Dr. Mario Guzman. So we'll continue to share these opportunities, great opportunities to come in person or and join us virtually if that works better for families at home with their very busy schedules. We are also starting a new effort with parent cafes where parents will have the opportunities to come together, connect, talk, listen, and share in clusters from different schools that are in our same neighborhoods. We'll be starting this effort up very soon and having parents come together and have the opportunities. These will be facilitated by family liaisons and really parent-led sessions where parents have a really chance to engage in dialogue and share their input with us and how we can be better partners in supporting our children. The Panorama Survey window will be opening up soon for students, staff, and families. This is an important tool that we continue to use to support all areas, all priority areas of our strategic plan: learning and growth, equitable systems, responsive and caring culture, and also stewardship of resources and empowerment. So as you'll hear in many of the updates, important things like belonging, important things like feeling supported, important things like feeling valued and feeling that there's opportunity. So it's critical to our improvement efforts in the district to have voice from our students, our staff, and our families, and you'll be hearing a lot from us and encouraging you to take the Panorama Survey in September, open September 26th. Finally, another plug for hiring. Please spread the word. We're an amazing team. We encourage you to spread the word. We're hiring for support positions, some instructional positions, as well as drivers, paraprofessionals, nutrition services, and of course, guest teachers. So please spread the word and visit our website for more information to apply. An important date that's coming up in mid-October, we want to encourage families to get immunizations, physicals complete if that's not already been done so. October 15th is the school exclusion date, so that's really critical. Please contact your school nurse if you need information on completing that requirement. And that's it for general updates this evening, and I'd like to transition now to an update specific to the area of equity and continuous improvement. So we have some of our team members coming up to the podium. Tonight we're pleased to share a formal report in the area of equitable systems. Many know, if you have any familiarity with VVSD, that equity is a core value that lives in everything we do in Valley View and is present and embedded in all of our strategic plan. Equitable systems is a specific priority area that is intentionally designed in our strategic plan to ensure that we are removing barriers to success, ensuring that our practices, access to resources, and opportunities are equitable for every learner. So our team tonight, beginning with Dr. LeVar Ammons, our Director of Equity and Continuous Improvement, is going to give you a glimpse of a big picture view of work that we've been engaged in the past year to build this infrastructure, strengthen our internal capacity, and really get set to dig into the work. So again, this is big picture, and we'll be sharing subsequent updates on how the work is going, the impact that it's having. And so I'd like to invite Dr. LeVar Ammons to come up to the podium and get us started.
All right, thank you, Superintendent Kinder. Good evening to the board, President Quigley. Also, good evening to senior leadership and also our Valley View School District family. As Superintendent Kinder mentioned, we are very excited to provide an update this evening on our equitable systems work, specifically around the infrastructure, mindsets, and actions that are needed to accomplish our goals in this specific area. So again, a lot of work has transpired and happened in the last school year. This will be a high-level overview, and I will say ahead of time that a lot of the things that we'll be discussing tonight could be presentations in and of themselves, but just want to give you all an idea of what's happening in the spaces real time and some of the things that we're really excited about. So then to further expound on Superintendent Kinder's reasons as to why equity, why now? And again, this is not an exhaustive list here of these bullet points, but we can go on and on as to why equity and why now. But specifically, number one, addressing long-standing educational disparities. We've looked internally, right, at ourselves, looked at our data. We've identified disparities that exist, and I will say that these long-standing educational disparities are not exclusive to Valley View. We're looking at, again, a national historical phenomenon in the terms of the disparities that exist within the educational systems. So that's the number one reason why. There are disparities that exist. We have to address those as a moral imperative as leaders and educators, right, to be able to educate and support every one of our learners. Going into that second bullet point there, we want to best support underserved students and stakeholders. And in order to do that, we really have to be intentional in our efforts and our work to do so. Next, we want to provide equal access and opportunity for every one of our learners. So whether we're talking about access to advanced academic programming, extracurriculars, so forth and so on, we want to be able to make sure we remove any barriers that we have to access for opportunity. And then lastly but not least, the pandemic impact on teaching and learning. So prior to the COVID shutdown, these longstanding educational disparities, they did exist, right? But as of the pandemic, in many ways it has exacerbated, right, the disparities that exist. So with that, we know we have to be intentional in our approach to addressing disparities in our school district. And also there is the understanding that when we speak of educational disparities, many of our students face challenges and face barriers. And what we'll say is that teaching and learning won't be to the level that we would like it to be, that we need it to be, if we don't take an intentional look at disparities and figure out in real time how do we then address those. So with that, I will now ask Ms. Maria Burgos to come and speak to educational equity.
Thank you. In alignment with the why, it's important to start with what educational equity means to us here in Valley View. So it means that every learner receives whatever they need to achieve academic and social success. It also means that there's no predictability of success or failure based on race, ethnicity, linguistic background, economic class, religion, gender, sexual orientation, physical and cognitive ability, or any other social political identity markers. It means that every child is seen for who they truly are, and their unique interests and gifts are surfaced and cultivated through a range of learning opportunities, activities, and materials. And our strategic plan and Portrait of a Learner competencies are the foundation to this work, which Adam will now highlight.
As Superintendent Kinder mentioned, the work around equitable opportunities for every one of our learners is directly embedded in both our strategic planning priorities and also our Portrait of a Learner, both of which give us a mandate toward what supports we must provide for every learner in our system. You'll notice that under strategic planning priorities, equitable systems is its own priority area. At the same time, the topic of equity works throughout all 4 of the priority areas of the strategic plan. There's equity aspects of a responsive and caring culture, of course with learning and growth, as Dr. Ammons mentioned, and then how we use our resources and how all of our stakeholders are empowered and barriers are removed so that every stakeholder can be empowered at the same level. And so our Portrait of a Learner, our strategic plan, just offer the larger context for the work, and now Dr. Ammons will dig deeper into some of the key action items that are taking place right now to move things forward.
All right, thank you. So when we, again, speak to equitable systems, and this is what we're looking at here is the equitable systems priority statement here. So as it relates to equitable systems, Valley View School District will remove barriers to success for every learner by ensuring equitable practices, access to resources, and inclusive opportunities in order to eliminate disparities in academic and social outcomes. It's pretty cut and dry and simple. As leaders, as educators here in our school district, leaders in the community, we're in the business of removing any barriers that exist for success for our students. So that is our aim, and that's what we're continuously working towards. And when we're thinking about systems and systems change, right? And being intentional in our work, what we're looking at here in this inverted triangle are some conditions that tend to hold equity challenges in place and things we really need to be mindful of within our system, right? To look at in our work going forward. So in that highest tier there, policies, practices, and resource flows, we're looking at kind of the explicit works of structural change, right? So then how are we communicating the expectations? What is the governing language? How do we allocate resources to best support the work going forward, right? To remove those barriers. In that middle tier there, kind of in that semi-explicit area, we have relationships, connections, and power dynamics. So what are the political implications in the relationship relationships that have to form within this work to be able to move the needle forward and reduce disparities. And then lastly, there are the mental models that we all hold as individuals, which is really a key for transformative change, which comes about us in ways that are implicit, right? So what are our values, our belief systems, those pieces that kind of we grew up with that really inform the way that we look at the world and how we see the world. But then on top of that, being able to take in other perspectives and widen our own perspective as to what may be needed at the individual level to shift mindsets within our system to, again, reduce disparities is what we're ultimately looking to do. And then as we're looking at those areas of change that we'll have to be mindful of in our system, here's the point where we're talking about being intentional in designing for equitable systems. So in this really four-part diagram that you're seeing here, number one, we're always looking to engage our leadership. It starts at the top, right? So whether we're talking about folks at the administration center, our principals, assistant principals, division heads, so forth and so on, we have to engage our leadership to be able to see the system. And in terms of seeing the system, we're speaking to data analysis, making sure that we are acknowledging where gaps are, and again, coming up with those practical ways to be able to address those gaps and those disparities. We're always telling our story of success when we speak to every learner every day. That's how we find our success in terms of being able to impact every one of our learners. That second tier, defining equitable outcomes, really speaks to the strategic plan that's been put in place, our portrait of a learner competencies, which speaks to the observable behaviors that we want to see that are in our system. And then the redesign aspect is really all about monitoring, right? So now that we have these goals in our strategic plan, these goals of what the aspirations we hold for our students, how do we then monitor that? What metrics are we looking at? And then at the very bottom there, we're going to continuously communicate, right? All of our efforts and work around equity, diversity, and inclusion. So now from the theoretical construct and kind of that space that we're living in, what about the infrastructure pieces that are currently in place that are supporting the work just throughout our system? And I won't go through each one of these because we're going to speak to them individually, but starting with our district strategic plan to senior leadership team, the Department of Equity and Continuous Improvement, these are the areas that we've been able to put into place over the last school year to be able to support the work long term. So speaking specifically to my role and also the Department of Equity and Continuous Improvement, here are just, again, a few highlights as to what the charge is. Again, not an exhaustive list, but some things that we really want to lean into and hang our hat on in terms of moving our work forward. So number one, leading all equity, diversity, and inclusion efforts in the district, of course, in partnership with senior leadership, with our principals, assistant principals, so forth and so on, to really, again, understand kind of the language and the commitment that we're making to drive equity forward. Next, the development and implementation of an equity-based multi-tiered system of support. So the aspiration is to have educational equity be a reality for our students, right? But the pathway to that is through a multi-tiered system of support that will support our students at universal levels, targeted levels, and intensive levels. Again, that's another presentation in and of itself, but we are certainly working to support that and build that work to meet our goals. And then lastly, collaborate with district and building leaders at all levels to evaluate and advance our equity and continuous improvement efforts. And we'll see that theme throughout this presentation. And to the right there, in the blue box, we see strategic plan obligations. So number one, in that leadership development, we also have to build our stakeholders' capacity to lean into this work courageously, right? Secondly, of course, we want to have a reduction in disparities in our discipline outcomes. And I've already spoken to the need to advance academic programming enrollment for students across the various demographics so it can reflect our student demographics. Next part of our infrastructure is the district equity leadership team. The role of this group is to, number one, organize data and analyze that data in order to be able to highlight equity needs. We certainly want to dig into policy, review policy for language that may be contributing to barriers, so we can then remove those and just, again, have those continuous conversations. As far as the infrastructure piece goes, what you've seen so far in terms of that bulleted pointed list around the infrastructure, again, that is not an exhaustive list. We'll look to continuously build the infrastructure of our work and grow the capacity of our folks system-wide to be able to do this work. And ultimately, we want to set expectations around professional practice, offering professional development opportunities, because again, we're espousing the value of equity and continuous improvement, but what does that mean for the folks in the buildings, right, who are trying to drive this work forward? So professional development is certainly a part of that plan to be able to give the folks the skills, the will, the knowledge, and capacity to lead in this way. And then, as I've spoken to before, being able to define and apply performance metrics. So as we look at our portrait of a learner competencies, we're looking at our strategic plan. What are the metrics for us to measure and to be able to understand, what are we doing well, what could be done better in the work that we're charged to do? For our district equity leadership team makeup, this team is comprised of roughly about 25, close to 30 now, members of our faculty and staff that range from senior leadership team members to principals. We have teachers, deans, counselors, LMC directors, just a wide range of perspectives and roles within the district to sit on this team. We'll primarily be monitoring that equitable systems priority area, but as Mr. Herder said earlier, the equitable systems piece is really underlined in all of our priority areas, so there'll be a monitoring there. And then as of the fall of last year, right around this time when we convened for the first time as a district equity leadership team, we were able to go over some overarching data that highlighted some disparities in our system, and we all decided on our top 3 that we wanted to really lean in and take a closer look at. And you can see there discipline, recruitment, hiring and retention, and also, again, access to advanced programming. And again, each one of these could be a presentation in and of itself, but wanting to give you all just kind of an overview of what we're leaning into as a system. Just real quick here, courageous leadership as that first part of the theory of change or designing or being intentional around designing equitable systems. We certainly want to lean into our leadership because it starts there. Whether we're talking about administration center leadership, our leaders in our buildings, principals and assistant principals, we are really looking forward to engaging the board in this work as well. But really, courageous leadership is all about these 5 areas: authenticity, resilience, emotional intelligence, self-discipline, and commitment to purpose. Leadership as a craft, we're always asking ourselves, how can we get better at what it is that we do as leaders? And it's not necessarily specific to our equity efforts, but leadership as a whole and being courageous in that, but in particular for the equity conversation, right? So we want to make sure we front load our leaders or give our leaders these skills to lean into as we think about what it means to do this work authentically. So last year, what you're looking at here is a professional learning strand, which we call Courageous Leadership for Equity. And we were able to engage, in specific, our principals and assistant principals around this work. So you can see in September, October, and in November of last year, we engaged in, sustained, and deepened our conversations around courageous leadership, specifically in how we look at data, looking at different student groups, and really being, again, intentional around the work that we've been doing in that space. We've used the Glenn Singleton's Courageous Conversation work to really kind of embed a framework of how to drive conversation. But then we also, in kind of that front loading in those first 3 months, we then brought in the work from the district equity leadership team around, again, those discipline disparities, the hiring practices, and access to advanced programming to really bring our leadership into the fold and bring some consistency or congruency around the work that we're doing. And again, this will be ongoing work. It's continuing even in this year and subsequent years to continue to develop and build that capacity to courageously lead this work. We've also brought in our instructional coaches into the conversation as well. So all of our instructional coaches, K through 12, last year we were able to lean into coaching for equity, which is another piece of a kind of the toolbox, or another tool in the kit for instructional leaders to be able to utilize in their practice with classroom teachers and bringing this work to the classroom level. So again, of course, we're living at kind of this 50,000 foot or 30,000 foot view of the work, but we certainly want to make sure this work gets down to the classroom level, and instructional coaches allow us the best opportunity to be able to do that. So in addition to having student-centered coaching models, we certainly want to bring about coaching around belief systems, behaviors, ways of being that really position teachers to show up in equitable ways for our students across the board. And then we have our equity ambassadors that exist in every one of our buildings across the district. There are 2 equity ambassadors in every school, and they do serve as members on the building impact teams. Ultimately, they're looking to support all of our equity, diversity, and inclusion work, our equitable systems work in those spaces. But specifically this year, we are leaning into staff and student relationship building and how to create these authentic relationships across differences, and some professional learning for the equity ambassadors this year. And of course, we would want them to also support and leading in student engagement efforts, because student voice is critical in this work. So then as we think about designing equitable systems with our leaders, and I've talked about principals, assistant principals, coaches, district level administration, teachers, and so forth, we're just at the very beginning, right, of building the infrastructure to support the work long term, and we'll continue to do that. And as far as our next steps, so number one, we want to be able to expand our equity leadership infrastructure. So what was missing from what we currently have is a more intentional work towards student voice, also continuing the work we've done with staff voice, and obviously adding community voice in there as well. We'll continue to make progress on those equity challenges that we've highlighted in our district equity leadership team space. We're doing some fantastic work now with strengthening our infrastructure for our multi-tiered system of support here in Valley View. So that work is currently underway. And then, of course, providing ongoing updates around the work that is happening with all of our equitable systems work. So I know that was a lot of information in a short amount of time, but I would love to open it up for questions if there are any.
Fire when ready, yeah. Go ahead.
I'll go. Everybody
All right,
says,
then.
go. You go first. I go first. Who's on first? Who's on second? I'm on up. My first question is that how are we going to get those student voices?
Student voice, we can do that in a number of ways. It's already happening now with our panorama data that we collect, also 5 Essentials. But I think more importantly, and I've talked with Mr. Locascio about this, is gathering student voice from doing focus groups in schools, which our equity ambassadors can help support with those focus groups. And also I've been having discussions around a student advisory, right? A district level student advisory to gather more voice.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Member Campbell, each building has a plan where they've targeted the focus for their efforts. And some buildings have started the effort with having student leaders at the table or student groups giving voice into the efforts. And we've had some really great examples of celebrations happening in our buildings, particularly at the secondary level, where our students are using their voices to help really define the work and help us, create that path in each particular building. We'll be spotlighting some of that in upcoming updates for sure.
My next question, when on the shift in the conditions that hold equity changes in place, if you just explain a little bit more to me about that. I see all the 6 conditions, and I see that the mental model is down at the bottom, and that counts in my mindset. The mental should have been up there first. So how is that going to work with this whole system?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think the policies, the practice, and the resource flows will inform folks at the individual level, how do we do our jobs, right? No matter how much mental model shifting we try to do, if the policies aren't in alignment with what the mental models are that we would like to see, then we're still going to find ourselves in a kind of in a juxtaposition. So we'll always lean into kind of building the capacity of folks while we're working on those high-level areas that really determine what the expectations are for our institutions. So I don't know, Superintendent Kinder, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly, and I would just add that from that mental models piece, I see this as being critical. It's that critical piece, right? Because we could change all of the policies that we want, right? But if that mindset is not present, it doesn't make a bit of a difference, right? So this work is not linear, right? We can't just say, hey, everyone make sure you got the right mindset, or here, we've changed all the policies, make it happen. It's a very iterative process in which we are through individual engagement and then larger scale and then larger scale. We're working on those pieces, and then it's just we're continuing to loop around. So it's not in order, because that mental models, that's the transformative change. So if you look at that inverted triangle, that's true transformation. Otherwise, it's just kind of structural. We just say we're going to do this, and we put our diversity statement and equity statement out there, and that's all it is. We want it to be more than words. It's lived, right? And so it's lived. We walk the talk. You see it, you hear it, you feel it. It's present in everything. That's when we know that that piece, that mental model, that true transformative change, it's present in the system regardless of the policies. But of course, the policies or the practices are reflective. They show it.
Next question. Okay, there's the voices out there. Where's the board voice at? Pardon me, Member Venegas?
That you were asking, where's the voice for the board, right, on there? That's what you
Yes. We see everybody else's voice. We got community. We want everybody involved in. So I want to see, where does the board lie at in all this?
I think that's a great question, and I think it's a critical piece to the puzzle. I know that in isolation, we can only be so strong. Together, collectively, at every level throughout the district, we all must be engaged and working together. So I'm very excited and hopeful for board engagement and for connecting and moving this forward together. So I'm here to support it. I know Dr. Ammons is here to support it. We have a great deal of other resources locally and at the state level too. So we're ready.
I have a question, and it goes back to slide number 11, and obviously well presented, and I think I've shared with Superintendent Kinder, we've been doing this in corporate America I launched it about 10 years ago with our diversity, inclusion, and at the time it was equality, but I think we've ended up in equity. My biggest concern, and I think you guys hit it on the head here, where it says that you guys have reviewed the data and determined 3 equity challenges that require prioritizing. And that's recruiting, hiring, and retention. It's in section number 11. And I caution you because it says here, out-of-state recruitment efforts, equitable hiring practices, workplace experience survey, district-wide staff of color affinity space. And which is fantastic. My big piece here is that we really need to focus on retention, right? Retention needs to be the priority, then recruiting, then hiring, right? Because it's going to be just a never-ending cycle if we do not do the right things to retain good quality educators, good quality administrators, and leadership. I know I've shared this with Superintendent Kinder on many occasions, right, where I often compare our district with where I came from, Edinburgh Consolidated Independent School District in Texas, and what they're doing to retain their staff and the bonuses and things. Now, obviously, it's not always a financial aspect, right? There's a growth and development aspect of it, but that's the biggest piece that I think, and I'm glad you guys have identified it as something that you guys need to take a deep dive. I would just, if I can throw in my 2 cents is, the recruitment is awesome. Going out of state, doing all those efforts, that's great. But I think we absolutely have some strong talent already here within our school district that we must retain, that we have to retain, and we have to put something in place to keep these educators, to keep our administrators, to keep our leadership in place here. and not be losing them to out of state. Because what we're doing here, they're doing it too. They want our staff. They want the very best from us, right? They, all these, I mean, even locally within the state of Illinois. I was just talking to a colleague of mine from Arizona. Their school district in right outside of Phoenix, they're 1,500 staff members short. And half of their staff isn't even certified, but they're in such dire need that they needed to just get these folks into the classroom to teach. So I guess those are my big pieces, right? You know, that we really have to focus on that retention piece. The recruiting, I guess it needs to be on and live and always constant, right? Because we always need to be filling that 20% that we lose. But I think the big piece is, as big as our school district is and as great as we're doing and as awesome as we got some really great educators and some really great administrators, we need to find a way to keep them. We need to find some methods and practices or things that we can do to develop them and keep them and retain them. So just my 2 cents on that. But excellent work here. I appreciate you guys putting this together.
Thank you. And just to lean into that, the retention piece, Mr. Venegas, you hit the nail on the head with that, right? So a few efforts that we've put into place already. There is a Leaders of Color affinity space that's already been underway even prior to me arriving here. There's also the Illinois State Board of Education now has allocated $2 million of grant money or grant funds that allow us to then, for them to support staff of color affinity spaces, right? So we've already got that work underway. We had some meetings actually last year that were incredibly powerful and productive from a support and retention standpoint, and we're going to further that work this year with that group in terms of offering opportunities for professional growth, connection, just increasing that sense of belonging here in the district as well. So the work is underway. We still have a ways to go with it, but we certainly, in identifying those specific areas, are taking some strides and steps towards making that a reality for us. Yeah. Thank you.
So I guess since we're on slide 11, I'll start there.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. So just for clarity, the items that are in your slides here, are these things that you're saying, that you've identified that we are not doing and we need to do, or are these things, I guess, because I was always under the impression that some of these items like equitable hiring practices, the workplace experience survey, and I don't know necessarily if it's been out-of-state recruitment, but I know, I think it has actually, and going to recruit from schools where, I'm trying to think of maybe like an HBCU or something like that that Dr. Mitchum or maybe Rachel was doing prior to that. Are you saying that we need to expand on that, or that these are things that we haven't been doing that we need to do? Just for clarity.
Yeah, I would say things that we can expand on, but also these were just areas where we recognized that there were disparities that existed, right? And again, in that understanding or identifying where these disparities are, what are we currently doing well, right, in these areas, and what are some opportunities for us to grow and get better at what it is that we're doing.
Okay.
And to go further in detail, obviously we can't do that all this evening, but Dr. Nash, our Director of Human Resources, Ravel Polak, are very much in tune with this. So yes, there are things that we're doing in all of those areas, but there's a lot of room for improvement. And so they'll be able to share specific updates about those efforts and then about the impact. And that workplace experience survey is really about staff voice, related to retention, as Mr. Venegas said, and then zoning in on that. So whether it's by demographic, how someone identifies racially, language, their specific role, are there groups of employees or individuals who don't feel connected, valued, supported, and then taking specific actions in those areas to say, okay, how can we improve so that people want to stay, they feel like they belong, they feel that they are valued. I see Kathy Ailes and Ravel Polak sitting in the audience. They've been working on a lot of pipeline efforts to provide additional support and opportunities for current staff, and it's been incredible. So we're super excited to share. We've been very busy in this area, but there's a lot of room for opportunity for growth too.
Okay, and then I'm going to skip back up to number 9, which I think is actually touched again on another one, on 11 as well. So can you correct me if I'm wrong, but when you say reduction of disparity in discipline outcomes, you mean from like situation to like situation, that the consequence for the action is there's disparity there? Is that what that means?
And yes, so in terms of, can you ask your question again?
Yeah, so in slide number 9, I'll skip you up there because I wrote that down verbatim. So it says reduction of disparity in discipline outcomes on the right.
Yes.
On the right-hand side. When you say that, are you saying that certain consequences are different from case to case, and you want to reduce the disparity between those, or maybe severity, if you will, of those consequences? Is that what that?
Correct. Yeah, we just see that there are large disparities in our discipline outcomes, and we want to again drill down a bit further as to why that may be, right, and come up with some solutions as to what we can do to minimize those disparities.
So, are you finding that the disparity is not only just from building to building, but within the same building?
The drill down hasn't gone that deep as of yet. This was kind of overarching initial data that we were looking at.
And the buildings definitely look at it at that level as well. And there's a lot of reasons. So it could be in our response. It could be in how we're interpreting things. It could be in our level of cultural competence. There's a lot of factors that go into it. So the critical piece is that at a district level, we're looking at this, we're aware of this, we're monitoring this, we're supporting that conversation and work to happen at the building and department level, so that we are having these conversations as to why we're seeing a large number of referrals in this particular behavioral infraction for this particular group of students. And so how do we really dig into that to support students so that we have a responsive and restorative approach?
Just for clarity, because I just want to make sure, and Member Pajeras, you brought a very good point. Is this based on the disparity for disciplinary for staff or students?
For students.
Students, thank you. I just want to make sure, because I know that under certain, we are held to the board to be able to see every specific disciplinary action, regardless of whether it's similar at one school or whatever, but we have to take everything into account and not say, well, we've done this in the past, so we're going to continue doing this. We need to take a thorough look at that particular disciplinary action that was taken, because it just can't be based on what we've done, this is what we're going to continue doing. It needs to be, guided with what specifically happened, what's all the studies behind it, what happened with this particular student, and so on and so forth. I just want to make sure I was clear with that. It was that we were talking about disciplinary action with students, not necessarily with staff.
Correct, with students.
Thank you.
So it's my understanding that presently each school they have a certain autonomy when it comes to the discipline of their students. So are we saying now that we're going to take this as more of a district, like a district guideline, if you will?
So we do have a student handbook that's consistent across the district in terms of how we apply, say, responses to behavioral infractions. That is consistent, right? Inside of that, schools do have the autonomy in how they respond to supporting student needs, and how they respond, proactively, and how they respond to supporting student needs. So yes, when there is a behavioral occurrence. So yes, there is a consequence, but not just in a punitive sense, a consequence in a learning restorative sense, so that the goal isn't just to, apply a consequence and move forward, but it's help to restore, repair, help that child to have more success with those behavioral or social emotional skills going forward. So schools have great level of autonomy. I mean, we are not robots, we are human, but what we want there to be is a similar approach, a similar mindset in how we look at our students and how we approach supporting students who are in need, or students who are showing us behaviors that are not desirable because there's something more there that our kids are trying to tell us or that our kids need. So I see Director of Student Supports, Lisa Allen, in there, and she could have a very great conversation with the board about this and with all of us about this to give you some further insight and lens into that. But to answer your question, no, the buildings have the full handle on how they handle this in the building. But consistently as a district, there are things that we are unified in our approach.
So I should have been more specific in the question. Going back to slide 11, it says suspension and expulsion review. Obviously, as the board, we're not we don't really know about detentions and referrals and this and that. I was more referring to the, you know, the more extreme of the consequences, because this is something that, you know, we've talked about, several of us have talked about as long as I've been on the board. So I would be curious to know how it is that you, how you're going to frame that, because I do think there's, you know, I don't want to say too much because I know some of the stuff that I've seen is, you know, confidential, but I would like to see that. I'm curious to see that part. But I do have one last question. You said something, and I don't think it's in a slide. I think it was part of your presentation, but and I think it was also in relation to discipline. But you said reflect student demographics. Could you explain that?
Yes. So in looking at our data, just a quick snapshot, we see that the way the data shakes out is not reflective of student demographics. So for example, black students make up roughly 20 to 22% of our student demographic district-wide, but as per the data from where we pulled these pieces from, they were disciplined, suspended, or expelled at 2 times the rate of their enrollment. Whereas for other demographics, that wasn't the case.
So when you were taking the comparison, are you talking about for the same, I don't know, what do you call it, infraction? This is the situation?
Correct.
So, so that's concerning.
Indeed.
So we're not talking about the you know, the infractions that occurred. We're talking about similar infractions with different consequences. So
No,
this is going back to the disparity of outcomes.
So there's a whole lot wrapped into that, and I do feel that this warrants a separate, like, I guess, deeper dive and conversation with a board report and with the conversation. But disparity could be seen in a lot of different ways, right? And so we're not saying that there's a disparity in the consequence or the response per se. We're saying that there's an over-identification or a larger amount of infractions, proportionately speaking, for, say, the African-American population. We do look at it by type of infraction as well. And so we look at it through many different lenses. But to say that, like, he's not just specifically speaking to disparities in the response to a disciplinary occurrence. That's not what we're referring to. Mm-hmm.
So we're not talking about if Group A, Group B, and Group C had, you know, one makes up 20%, one makes up 30%, one makes up 40%, and there's 10 infractions across the board that they're being treated differently, or are we talking about just the volume of
We're talking about the volume. We're talking about the volume. So there's more referrals, you know, proportionately speaking, for African American, or more specifically African American males, proportionately speaking. So Dr. Ammon's reference, roughly 20 to 22%. It makes up a much greater, 2 times greater percentage in that overall percentage of referrals, for example.
So are we saying that that's being punished at a different, or reacted to at a different rate? I guess that's what I'm getting at here.
I think what we're saying is that looking at the data, big picture, there's the need to have these conversations and this response, because there's a whole lot inside of that question that you just asked that, frankly, tonight we probably don't have the time to give it its due justice in the conversation. But in terms of students at a particular grade level or in a particular class, or students, the types of infractions for, let's say, defiance or insubordination, and it's with a particular demographic group, like, we have to ask ourselves, why? What is missing? Is there something about me and my practice in my classroom, how my classroom is structured, how I'm communicating with students? Is there something with maybe a lack of understanding or a gap with individual students, relationships, connection, and all that? So it's a very deep conversation that we are engaging, and we don't shy away from those conversations, and it certainly warrants a much deeper dive, and then in turn, response.
Okay, so, and that was what I was getting at. So this is what we're looking, the purpose of the deep dive is to find out why one group has more detentions than another group. That's, okay.
And that's kind of the point of this whole thing. I mean, you summed it up right there. That's why we're doing this. Great information, great questions. Oh, Vic?
I have a question. On page 11 here on your slide, it's your DELT, the District Equity Leadership Team. It's comprised of 25 faculty and staff. So if we have 21 schools, shouldn't we have a couple people from each school on this team so you could get an opinion?
Yes, and again,
Staff from the district is on the team compared to the staff in the schools.
Speak to the structure on that. The equity ambassadors that he referenced, there's 2 in each building. Those are current staff members serving in a variety of roles. They've also taken on the role of being an equity ambassador. So there's 2 per each building that do come together as a group in connection with Dr. Ammons and the coordinators, and they all work together kind of as this collective. So we do have building representation because those individuals are in the buildings doing the work with their building administration and their building leadership teams. So they are the collective there. This district equity leadership team there's representation from every level, multiple roles, administration, staff, et cetera, but this is just more of a steering type of committee that looks at it from a strategic plan level. In terms of doing the work, there is representation from every building inside of the structure. Very, very important question that you ask because that is critical.
Sometimes, like from the private sector, when you really want to find an answer out, it's about the people that are in the schools that will give you that answer that we're sitting in a building over here that we don't look at, we don't see the day to day. Each school's so different. How is it going to be, how are you going to mesh it all together?
yeah, I would say that our, number one, our strategic plan, right, is this guiding document as to putting us on the path to what needs to be done. So that's kind of our governing document around this work. Also understanding that each school is different. That's where the action planning and kind of the messiness around really determining how we're going to roll this work out in individual buildings happens.
Yes. Thank you. Everyone to participate. And so my thing is now, where do we go from here and how fast are we going?
Well, that is
I just hit the point.
fantastic question. Again, on my next steps, so next steps in relation to all of the work, or did you have a specific pointed area?
Where we're going, because just like Member Baderas, he the one who gave these thoughts in my head, is that, he had a lot of questions, and so will that first step be sitting with the board so we can better understand where we're going, since we are part of that,
That is our hope, to engage the board in deeper conversations about all of our work, but specifically around kind of leadership development for this work, and really being able to have conversations to the questions that Mr. Baduras had this evening about discipline and really doing that deep dive. So I've been in conversation with Superintendent Kinder as to ways that we could make that happen in terms of facilitating some opportunities for the board to lean in a little bit deeper.
Next question is then, I'm on the roll now. So how often do your team meet?
Which one? I have a number of teams. Which?
Yeah, the team that put all this together, like Member Vice President Zach was saying, about the 25, I guess.
Oh, we meet monthly.
But keep in mind, I know this is a lot to take in, and this is just the first sharing of information, and then subsequent updates will take pieces and pull those through. But that infrastructure that we talk about, there's teams at many levels, and there's teams that go across. So there's building teams that are doing work on a daily basis. And then there's staff development and teams of teachers that are engaging in work and cohorts that are engaging in work. And then there's teams at the district level that meet to connect that work up, collaborate with each other, align those efforts. And then there's senior leadership and the steering committee, the district equity leadership team. So we are being very intentional about the design of building that infrastructure, because we know it's not just a group of people sitting in a district office talking about this work. It's the people doing the work, right? But it's also important that we're being thoughtful about how we connect it. So on any given day, there are pieces of this work moving. And in future updates, we're going to show you examples of work that building teams are doing, that cohorts of teachers are doing, that some of these specific roles of individuals are doing. And you won't just hear from, you know, LeVar or me or someone that's standing up here now, one of our executive directors. You'll hear from individuals throughout the organization. And then to your previous question, I'm very eager to support the board engagement in workshop and future conversations and board development. I firmly believe this is work we do as individuals, but also that we do as an organization, because we are a system and we are only as strong as our efforts together. So I'm ready.
I believe this is my last question. I'm not going to be like the preacher, say I got another, 5 minutes, but I'm not asking for that. But so my specific question is, when will you engage these boards? When will there be dates on the calendar that the board will move forward? That's the specific question that I'm asking.
That is a question for the board. And so the board should identify dates. We can coordinate calendars. We have individuals to support the workshop. Shelley will reach out to confirm board members' availability. She can do that tomorrow. And we can get those dates set. But certainly, I'm confident that we can find those dates. But that is definitely a question for the board.
We need this team and the other teams at the table too. So not just only the board, we can give you the dates, but we also need to know that you are available to do this work, or whoever you need to call in from the outside. But we're hoping that we can get as much work done from the inside, since this is a part of us and this is our family. So we should be able to come along and help our family before we go outside.
Absolutely, and we are ready. There is no greater priority for us. So we will make ourselves available to be at the table engaging with you. And I have done personal outreach to Illinois Association of School Boards. We've also connected with an individual that's local to our community that does this facilitation and work with school boards and other organizations that I think would be a tremendous asset. So LeVar had a conversation with that individual, and we have a follow-up very soon as well. So we can absolutely coordinate that, and it is definitely a we.
Thank you all.
Anything else? Leo, I concur heavily with what you said. One of the things we're committed to is retention of staff. And, because if you train somebody for a year or two and then you lose them to another district, that's a problem. And that goes all the way. It doesn't mean, your first level teacher, it goes whatever that is. And I do concur with that completely. Again, great questions and back and forth on this. There's a lot of information in here, and there's a lot of things that need to be done. But you guys have put a pretty good foundation together. So we'll see where this all goes. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Yeah, we've been fairly busy in the last year, and it's very exciting and promising to hear the questions and the energy that you all are bringing to this conversation, and we most certainly look forward to engaging a bit deeper around it. So thank you.
Okay, we do have another information report this evening. And we're going to give you just a small snippet in this area, because again, this is a biggie. This is what we do. This is learning and growth. So tonight, we're just kind of taking one step at starting that conversation. And again, we'll have regular subsequent updates that focus in particular areas or take deeper dives. In this particular update this evening, we want to share information with you about learning and growth for grades 3 through 8, specific to IAR, the Illinois Assessment of Readiness for the Reading and Math Results of Spring 2022. So we want to just share this information as we're kind of drawing some closure to this period of time that we have been a part of for the past 2 years, and then look at that in context of what that looks like as a district at the state and moving forward into our efforts to support learning and growth. So Executive Directors Adam Herter and Maria Burgos will be sharing information with you, along with Michael Lacasio, Director of Data and Assessment.
Thank you, Superintendent Kinder. So in the focus on our learning and growth priority area from the strategic plan, this is our priority area statement. every learner with equitable access to high quality instruction, and student success with the skills and knowledge to do the following: to persevere, to advocate for themselves, and to take ownership of their own learning. So clearly our staff has an enormous role to play in this. Our leaders have an enormous role to play in this. But when we talk about learning and growth, we're also talking about that student-focused piece of how can we ensure that there aren't barriers for any students, number one, and that our students are able to do extremely difficult work, persevere through it, and become successful. Maria Burgos is going to come up next to discuss one area of learning and growth that we're going to present about this evening.
So the objective that we'll be looking at tonight is the students' academic growth and proficiency will increase annually and the Illinois state assessments. So what we'll be looking at is the most recent test results in IAR, the Illinois Assessment of Readiness, taken in the spring of 2022 by students in 3rd through 8th grade. And this data allowed us to take a look into the impact that the pandemic had on student learning. Michael Lacasio is going to walk us through just a brief overview on what IAR is, and also share some research around the pandemic and the impact that it had on student learning.
Good evening. So the Illinois Assessment of Readiness is administered in grades 3 through 8. It measures English, language arts, and mathematics. It is a state-mandated assessment. What you'll notice over on the right, though, is over the past few years, we have had some extenuating circumstances. In 2020, the federal government waived all assessments, so there was no administration of Illinois Assessment of Readiness. And in 2021, we were still in the midst of offering remote learning, so we had limited participation. Roughly 50% of our students participated in the 2021 administration of the Illinois Assessment of Readiness. As a result, these results that we'll go through today reveal that learning and achievement will continue for the short term, hopefully, to be impacted by the pandemic. Two of the larger assessment companies are the NWA and Renaissance Star assessments. In Valley View, we used to administer the NWA. We now have switched over to Renaissance Star. Both of these assessments are what are known as interim assessments. They are offered within the school year in the fall, winter, and spring. Because of the vast databases that these resources that are available to these companies, the ability to measure growth and achievement before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and now as we emerge from the pandemic is a valuable resource to all school districts in the country. These two organizations have released multiple research studies. What you see quoted here are just two examples. The first, the NWEA Center for School and Student Progress, is the research division of the NWEA assessments. And in June of 2022, they stated that there is a significant learning loss across all grades and subgroups as a result of the pandemic. What this is speaking to is that all students, both high achieving and middle achieving and low achieving students, have been impacted. It's not just achievement, though, it's also the rate of learning. In the 2022 school year, the rate of student learning has improved. So last year it has improved from the years during the pandemic, but it is still lower than the years prior to the pandemic. And their study concluded that there will be a minimum of 3 years before achievement levels will return to pre-pandemic rates. Renaissance has also offered many studies, and their most recent from March of 2022 confirmed much of this. The pandemic continues to have a profoundly disruptive effect on student learning. Despite returning to in-school instruction, students are performing lower in the 2022 school year. They measured fall to winter, both growth and achievement, as being lower than both during the before the pandemic, though it was higher than during the pandemic. And again, they confirmed that there will be multiple years for true recovery to take place. The NWA studies, the Renaissance Star studies, as well as other groups have all shown that math achievement has been impacted to a greater extent than ELA during the pandemic. I don't know what to do with that.
Stand by for technical difficulties. We need that little thing that comes up on your TV. Beep. We did pay our bill, right? Okay, just checking. There we go.
Thank you so much. So let's talk about the story that we see in our data. Specifically, we're going to discuss where are we now, meaning as of the end of last year, which is what this data is measuring, the Illinois Assessment of Readiness Assessment in the spring of 2022. We'll also look back at where were we in the spring of 2019, which is the last apples to apples type comparison assessment where all of our kids took the assessment in the spring. We have noticed, similar to the research that Mr. Locascio referenced nationally, within Valley View, the levels of proficiency have fallen in both literacy and math in all of our grade levels. We'll show you specific charts to show you the further evidence of that. We do note that our students had similar outcomes in terms of how much they grew during the pandemic. So a student who would have gone from 3rd to 6th grade, for example, or 4th to 7th grade, that our averages were similar to what we had seen around the state, and our declines in math are very similar to the significant declines seen across the United States. We did see in reading that our students, based on just initial, not publicly released state information, so we will not be quantifying that this evening, but the rate at which our students learned through the pandemic in literacy appears at initial investigation to be a celebration in that it significantly exceeds what happened around the state of Illinois and what is shown in those research studies. So there's a lot of room for improvement and also some positives for us to build upon. So specifically, let's just look at where we were as of spring. This chart is ELA in red, English Language Arts, math in blue, by grade. So this is the percent of students who were proficient or above in those grade levels just at the end of last school year. You'll note in grade 3, is our one example where our mathematics score was higher, and of course our teams are doing a significant dive into exactly what is behind that so that we can build on positives there. And again, you'll notice how our math scores are significantly lower at each grade level when compared to our literacy scores.
And this graphic demonstrates ELA proficiency rates when you compare them between the years 2019 versus 2022. And once again, the gray bar is the representation of the 2019 scores, and the red is the 2022 spring scores. The table at the bottom illustrates proficiency drops at each of the grade levels. So when comparing to 2019, we can see the impact the pandemic had on student learning, and the proficiency rates in most grades were lower than 2019 levels. And what we're seeing now is the math proficiency rates from 2019 versus 2022. So as Adam outlined, we see the trend that the math results in our math results that the pandemic had a greater impact on our math scores.
And just to reference quickly, this is what the national research data indicates. It shows that Valley View is also in a similar situation to these national studies and averages, also across the state of Illinois more specifically. Tonight is not about a deep dive into our mathematics instruction. However, just to want to be very clear that the district, when it comes to building leaders, our educators, our curriculum and instruction staff at the district level have gone through this data the second it's available to them, gone through it backwards and forwards, sliced it up in every way possible to understand where we have needs, what we can do with our curriculum. And of course, already this fall, there's significant adjustments in place targeted directly toward this data so that the multi-year improvements that the studies Mr. Locascio referenced in our system are as short a time frame as possible until we get our students back to where they were performing pre-pandemic. This is what I was speaking to earlier. We're going to look at literacy first and then math. This is if you look at students of the same students, so across. What we were looking at prior was third grade to third grade, so not the same students. This would be the same students or cohort. And what you'll notice in English language arts, our proficiency rate is higher at the end of each of these student cohorts' experiences after the pandemic than it was prior to the pandemic. And we feel that, again, based on initial examination, that this is definitely unique in Valley View, at least compared to national and statewide trends. And that information is not released until October officially by the state, but we're just wanted to give that narrative this evening. In mathematics, it's the reverse narrative to some degree. So you especially notice in the 3rd to 6th grade cohort, we have a significant drop in the rate of students who were proficient as 3rd graders to then as 6th graders. The positive in this is that as kids progress through our system, going into the end of elementary school, into the end of 8th grade, we're able to mitigate that loss to a degree at about the average of what we see in the state, or potentially a little bit less of a learning loss as we have seen compared to the Illinois state averages that we are not being released yet.
So what are our next steps as far as supporting all of our learners? Our schools have reviewed IAR preliminary scores for students. We've reviewed it at the district level, at the school level. Our principals are currently working with their building improvement teams to take deep dives into the data to provide supports. And we are also being very intentional in the way that we're looking at data. We're using a data analysis protocol across the district to be able to look at how students are performing by grade, by ethnicity, socioeconomic situation, language proficiency, and more, so that we are intentional in providing those supports that are needed by our students. In addition to that, we're rededicating to the work that was done pre-pandemic, but also adjusting to new strategies via professional development and learning in order to support all of our learners. In addition to that, we're maintaining rigor, and we're making sure that all of our students at various proficiency levels are bouncing back, right? And that we're in the work and that we're addressing all of their needs.
And some of the items, and these span our pre-K building all the way through our high schools and our STEP program, are getting, of course, to our portrait of a learner, making that become a reality in our classrooms. So teaching kids the skills and competencies that are necessary to be successful within our system and when they leave our system. Of course, we're focused on those gaps in the data that you've seen this evening and reducing those. We also are expanding our focus on the whole student. We know that through the pandemic, students face many challenges, our families face many challenges, our educators and our staff face many challenges. And as we return, this is a multi-year process of working towards academic readiness, but also social readiness, emotional readiness, so that all students are ready to learn.
And then in addition to that, we're creatively researching ways to engage our littlest learners and looking at how we're providing supports, and then looking for funding and things to really get our students the supports that they need early on. And in addition to that, it's all about our students owning their learning and the progress, and really working with them and our staff to be able to do that. So we're ready to get in the work. We're excited for our students, and it's looking bright for us, for sure.
Yeah, and just to summarize, these are images of our children and our system. What they went through during the pandemic, the amount of learning they were able to demonstrate is commendable. Want to, of course, again, thank all of our educators that persevered through to make those learning opportunities possible in the most difficult of circumstances, and families who, supported their student to be as ready to learn as possible. And I think our takeaway, heading into this fall is we knew Valley View would not be immune to the effect of the pandemic. All the research studies indicate that. When we did get our results, however, we do notice some things that we did really well pre-pandemic, continuing through the pandemic. We also notice areas of need caused by the pandemic, but have specific approaches to address those. And as Ms. Burgos said, down to the individual student level. So what does the student truly need to be able to become successful and get back to the level they were performing at? We can take any questions or comments at this time.
I have a question. Earlier, somebody stated that they need 3 more years to return to pre-pandemic rates. So as they get to 3 years, how far have they fallen back? I mean, how much time will they need to be caught up? Say a 3rd grader or a 4th grader.
This is speaking to research from NWEA and also Renaissance Star. They're going off of aggregate, so they're saying if we take all students in this grade level and we compare their average achievement level, it's about, I believe it's 7 to 10 percentile points lower now than where it was pre-pandemic. Individually, certain students will grow faster than other students. So when we look at how do we move that aggregate, the aggregate will take 3 to 5 years to catch up to where we were before the pandemic. Some students will catch on quickly, others will need more time.
So having them go to summer school, would that be a big help in order to expedite them to catch up? Longer school days?
There are a lot of creative solutions. To speak to your example of summer, in the middle and high school level, what we noticed was the pandemic resulting in a lack of engagement by students in schooling in general. Being home, being in the remote setting, even coming back last year, it was a different feel in person at school than it had been prior. And we focused the last prior summers with the funding we receive to mitigate COVID impact on re-engagement activities throughout the summer that connect academic skills to get kids prepared to learn, but also to just bring them back into the mold of, I belong at the school, I like to be at the school, people care about me at the school, going to the school is engaging, it's valuable for me to go to school every day to achieve my goals. And so that at the secondary level has been one focus. We also have our high school summer school, which is another summer program aimed at recovering credit. So students who need additional learning enroll in the summer school courses to get reteaching on sections of that curriculum. And then Ms. Burgos can discuss, they have a significant program at the elementary level as well.
So we were really excited this past summer to have amazing educators stay on board with us. Even though it was a long year, they were dedicated to the work and the learning of students. And we were able to offer summer school for our students. We had great attendance, smaller classroom settings so that students could get the supports that they needed. And provided them resources for the teaching, and we had some amazing feedback from our teaching staff that worked our summer school. And our students and parents also, they benefited from it. The students and the parents were excited to have extended learning for our students at the elementary. So we're pretty proud of that.
I think it's a multi-pronged approach. So anything that we can do to extend the learning, whether it be extending the school day or into the summer, is critical. The point of referencing the research, though, is just to state just how profound the impact is, and not just academically, but social, emotionally, and in many other ways. So to say that that is the number, or that we will be able to, break that down even further, we can't say that. What we can say is it is profound, and that we are continuing to monitor real time, not just waiting for, the spring administration of the state assessment, to see how our kids are growing, and then having a system, which we referred to earlier, to provide those additional supports or make changes to that, what we're doing for all kids at the universal level. But it all has to continue to work in unison together so that we can minimize that prolonged impact for our kids, because the urgency is here. So for me, it's full court press. It's all in, all hands on deck. We're doing everything we can now in these critical years of coming out so that we can attempt to cut that back as much as possible.
So the key here is to figure out how to close that 3 years and make it 2 years or whatever. That's the challenge. And
Yes,
is to
so
shorten that period as fast as we can.
Pre-pandemic, Valley View kids in many circumstances and comparatively speaking were growing at rates higher than their like peers pretty much anywhere across the state. So we need to return that and, return to get to that point so that we're continuing to make up that gap. And as for an individual student and for our groups of students and for that big overall picture that we're saying our kids are not just achieving at this percentage, but our kids are making up ground and growing at rates greater than maybe they would be predicted to grow, or that their like peers are growing in other places. So it is, there is an intensity, there is urgency with it, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we can have the best curriculum, the best instruction, but if our kids aren't connected and aren't in a caring community, the job is next to impossible. And so that's why our educators really have returned to that place of ensuring that that is really strong, that classroom community, that connection with kids. And they just do an outstanding job, because we can't, the old adage, first the heart, then the mind. If we're not together and we're not with our kids, we can push all we want academically, and we're only going to be able to get so far. So it is about just that core foundational need of connection, belonging, and then the sky's the limit. And our kids have shown us that when we raise the bar, they're going to go with us. And our educators have shown us that despite all these odds that are stacked against us, we are continuing to move the needle for our kids. And so that's the work that we're returning to. And this is truly the first time since 2019 that we have been in this place where we're able to start kind of really, really moving in that direction and kind of coming out of this survival mode that adults to the littlest kids have been in for a significant amount of time. So we can't minimize that. We can't undo it. We can't change it. That's the reality. I'm just as excited as everybody just to close this door and say, okay, this is where we are. And I've heard it said before that this year data is really kind of truly a new baseline. There's so much wrapped up into whatever data we're looking at from years prior that we are have to get a handle on it with our district assessments, with the teacher assessments, the day-to-day assessment of our kids' needs, and then start to build up from here. But most importantly, ensuring that we are creating those mechanisms to ensure that our kids are growing. And when they're not, we're able to respond. So we certainly have our work cut out for us, but there is not a team anywhere in the state that is going to be able to rise to this occasion and create, I guess, the best bounce back that we possibly could, and that's Valley View.
So and if I can just add real quickly, I mean, because the fact that we have a strategy, right? We've identified we have a gap and we have a strategy and we have to execute on this strategy to get these kids up there. Because I mean, I have 2 kids in the district, and one of them flourished in the virtual world of, through the pandemic, and one of them struggled. And then both of them kind of are struggling back into the real life of being back in school. But at the end of the day, I think the fact that, it starts at home with the families, right, with the parents, and it kind of will grow into the schools, right? And I think that, I believe that the strategy that our school district has put in place, the fact that we've identified there is a gap, and we're putting these interventions, and we're having these conversations, and we're putting this together, is a strategy so that we're able to your point, President Quigley, minimize that gap from whatever that is, 3 to 2 to 1 year. I don't know necessarily if it's summer school, right? But I think it's about trying to get our kids, and not just our kids, but the families, the parents, and the whole community back into that new state of norm of going from survival mode to thriving mode, because that's what we've been used to for so many years in this school district, right? And I think, we went into survival mode because of what the situation was. And I think now it's turning that corner to go back into that thriving mode. And we have a strategy. We've got a plan and we've identified it. It's now just a matter of how we execute it. And you know, we know we have the team for it. So, you know, I applaud you for that the team has identified it, and now we're going after it and we're going to execute on it. So thank you very much. I mean, I feel confident that my kids will do well. So thank you so much.
Anyone else?
So what else do you need from us as a board to give to the children for them to succeed more? Is there anything else that you guys need from us?
I mean, in the broadest sense, it's the resources and the support to put our strategic plan into place. And that's, you know, trusting the teams that you have in place to do this work, knowing that we have all of the expertise we need. And despite funding challenges and all of that, I truly believe we have the resources that we need too. So it's a matter of letting us, you know, giving us the support to put the plan in place. And then there'll be specific things that we will need, that we will ask for. But it's not for lack of a plan, it's not for lack of resources, and it's certainly not for a lack of having skilled educators, support staff, and leaders who know what we need to do to help our kids get to where they need to be on that post-secondary plan, and to really reconnect and partner with our families to really accelerate that. So we will let you know. I appreciate that question, Member Zach.
Great question.
Well, I think everybody here knows that especially with kids, if you give them, put the challenge before them and give them parameters within that challenge, they'll try to rise to meet that challenge. You can't give them a 5-year horizon on a challenge when they're in 3rd grade, but you can do it in short bites that they can see achievement and growth and accomplishment more than anything. And that's just me from being an old coach. So there's methodologies to do that, and I hope that you guys can tap into those, and that's why you're here. So good stuff. Thank you. Appreciate it. Anybody else have any questions? Moving down the agenda. Oh, button. No?
Saying thank you, that's all.
Where are we at? We are at RC Hill Edition. Who's got that?
I
John?
got it. I'm still here.
This is John and Mike. I don't know who's doing it. Okay.
This is an informational item in your packet which pertains to the RC Hill addition and renovation. The Finance Committee met on August 22nd and discussed this project. The scope of the project will include building a new multi-need space that will act as a cafeteria and gym. The project will also allow for renovation and relocation of various spaces, such as a new and larger gym, various office spaces, media center, and reconfiguring the main vestibule to provide better security. But based on the scope of this project, the district will forego using a construction manager on this project and instead will utilize prime contractors. The primary strategy for this structure is to allow the district to be flexible in responding to current economic and market conditions. It is also important to note that the Board of Education approved professional service contract with White & Company in June of 2022 to provide design services for this project. This is an informational report agenda item, and it is the administration's intention to bring prime contracts to subsequent board meetings for your approval.
So to touch on that, Finance Committee met when we initially this was pointed out to us for the need, and apparently the need's been there for a long time, but it came in substantially over, estimates came over what we thought the cost would be. We were in the neighborhood of $6.5 million, and the cost estimates came in at $9 million. So we made a decision to go out and do a traditional bid and be competitive and put it in the market. Sometimes construction managers a lot of times they do a great job of whittling away at the actual contractors themselves, and they provide great service. And we may very well go back to that model in our next project. But because of the way the market is right now, with materials and manpower and so on and so forth, we just felt like something coming in over $3 million on an estimate. This wasn't even an actual bid. The best thing to do would just be go back to the traditional bid making and let the competition be what it is. Bid documents were put out. There was a pre-bid conference. And when are the bids due back in? Or are they already back in, Mike? In a week or so? Yeah, so that's all going on. We still want to make sure that we can meet the time frame that this construction project will start if all the things come in the way we hope. Sometime in January, they'll start doing some site work, and then, or whenever, in this early spring, doing site work, so that as soon as the buildings close, they can start demolition and doing what they have to do. So we'll have a new kitchen and all the other things that are part of this that RC Hill desperately needs. And it'll also be a community center that we can use for other things as well. So it's going to be hopefully a very good project. But we're going to try and save as much money as we can to do this as well. So that's the reasoning for going away from what we've not traditionally, or we have traditionally done, is a construction management model. So hope that if anybody has any questions, ask. But that's how we got where we are there. So thank you for that. VOIP. Mr. Renich, I'm assuming that's you.
It is me. Thank you. The district has always utilized this service to maintain its Mitel equipment, which supports our phone communication system, also referred to as voice over IP. After conducting a selection process, it was determined that GregCom was the most qualified vendor. This is an informational item, and the administration's intent is to bring the attached agreement to the September 26th Board of Education meeting for your approval.
Anybody has any questions on that? Talk to John.
I actually just had a concern. There's some equipment in there that is sunsetting. I happen to work for a large corporation that does VoIP, voice over internet protocol systems. And I know that I've worked with, and I brought up some concerns in the past. There is some equipment that our school district has that is outdated and should be sunset because it won't be fully functional for our needs as we continue to evolve. As our company says, future-proofing our business. So if you guys have any questions or concerns over voice over IP, that's part of my business.
Duly noted. Moving down the agenda, what you all came for tonight, the big legal services report.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Association reports, AFT. Seeing none, moving down the agenda, Valley View Council report. Same. Valley View Office Personnel Council report. And same again. Any old business before the board? Any new business before the board? As always, Freedom of Information requests are run through Mr. Blaney, and they are available on our website, and you can file one of those on the website as well. Any announcements by the board? Any announcements by the administration? I just have a real quick one, the announcement. I want to thank everybody who came out to walk in the parade for Bolingbrook last weekend. It was wet, and it was reduced, unfortunately, because of the rain. Lots of band kids were there, ready to go, but we just couldn't get around it. I threw a suggestion to the mayor, and I'm going to suggest it to somebody in the administration about doing something different with parades next year and see if I'm not going to say what it is because I'm going to float it up the river to the people who actually do the logistics first, but see what they say, and we will see about that. Next weekend is the Romeoville Parade, and that kicks off on Sunday at 2 o'clock. So you get the first half of the Bears game, but not the second half. And it starts at starts, well, yeah, more or less at AVM and goes over to the rec center, athletic center. So anyway, we will be there and walking in the parade and so on and so forth. So all that being said, we've had a long meeting. If anybody else has anything for the good of the order? If not, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved. Second.
Motion and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The ayes have it. Have a great and safe evening.